Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Senator Modi, for putting forward this emergency debate. I think it's so important. This debate is really all about Canada. It's about where we've been, where we are, and where we intend to go as a nation. It's also striking to me how human nature has achieved such amazing accomplishments, technological accomplishments. We are living probably in a standard of living never seen before. But yet it seems so elusive to teach human nature to be decent to your fellow human beings, to be respectful, not to be afraid of differences of other people, but embrace them, learn from our differences. I still believe this is the greatest country in the world. That's been instilled in me by my parents who came to this country in the 1950s. I believe there is no country other than Canada. It has given such opportunities to so many people. We've all come here with the same dreams and aspirations. Many of us in this place are immigrants yourselves. Most of us are ancestors of immigrants who came here with dreams, hopes, came here because of the same reasons. They were fleeing war-torn countries. They were fleeing persecution. They were fleeing depression. They were looking for better opportunity. It doesn't matter if they were French or English or everybody in between. That's the story of Canada. And Canada has offered that opportunity to millions of people. It's offered them the opportunity for a better life. I think also Canada has benefited immensely from that diversity. At the end of the day, we use that language, we say that diversity is our strength. I believe diversity is part and parcel of Canada's elements and the most essential components of our elements. But I honestly believe that our strength is our unity. I think we become the strongest possible country when we emulsify all that diversity into one Canadian nationality. And at the end of the day, everybody that comes here, in addition to achieving call it the Canadian dream, like my parents did, at the end of the day, we all want in. We all want to feel that we're Canadians. Nobody more, nobody less. We're all the same. And if we can't achieve to provide that to all our citizens, then we are not complete and we have not really reached our true capacity. My parents came here, like I said, in the 1950s. They came here with enthusiasm. They landed in a place called Park Extension. That's my hometown. Park Extension is really the landing pad for hundreds of thousands of immigrants. I know probably Senator Munson would know very well where Park Extension is, because I know he's done some time in Montreal. It's a place that's embraced Irish, it's embraced Jews, it's embraced black people, it's embraced Greeks and Armenians and Italians and South Asians. We've all come through that place, at least those of us that are children of immigrants. And it's a place that we all coexisted in peace, in harmony, with the same objectives, the same experiences. Doesn't matter the color of your skin, doesn't matter if you went to the Catholic Church or to the temple or to the synagogue. We all came from a similar background, the same aspirations, all wanting that Canadian citizenship to be as much part and parcel of our heart and who we are, as much as our neighbors, as much as the English who came before us and the French who came before us, and obviously the Indigenous people who are native to this land. And that's really what the objective here is. That's what our challenge is. And I remember speaking recently. I went to Park Extension and I spoke in a local Hindu temple. And I was introduced by the president of the temple as somebody who was born and raised in Park Extension. And today, Park Extension is primarily a South Asian community that's there. And I spoke to the people, and it happens to be the riding of Prime Minister Trudeau's as well. And when I started speaking to them, you saw their eyes light up when they found out that that's my neighborhood. That's where I grew up, on the Rocher Ball. My experience and my parents' experience is the same experience that they were having. And they were shocked that somebody of that experience and that background can rise up to be a representative of the upper chamber of the Senate. And you saw the energy in that room, how these hardworking mothers and fathers who have been in this country for such a short period of time were saying to themselves, heck, maybe my kids one day can do it as well. And of course they can. And this institution, I'm also proud of the fact that it is representative. Maybe not as much as it should be, but we're working at it. Canada is work in progress. I also remember being in Toronto a couple of years ago, a Greek Independence Day parade, and I'm on the Danforth. And this 76-year-old lady comes up to me and in Greek says, Mr. Housakos, is your mother Anastasia Housakos? I said, yes. Does she come from a small little village in southern Peloponnese? And I said, yes. She goes, I know the family name. And she started crying and hugged me. The biggest hug I ever got from the 76-year-old lady on the dance floor. I'm saying, what the heck is she crying about? And I looked at her, she says, I'm so proud of you. She says, you represent everything we're all about when we came to this country. And I realized at that particular moment, I'm not just a representative of the Senate for the province of Quebec and the city of Montreal, and I do represent with pride and joy my province, but I also represent the aspirations of that community and those people. So colleagues, I think when we talk about some of the issues that we're talking about today, we have a moral obligation, particularly as this chamber, to do more than symbolism. I think today is great. We get to talk about our personal experiences, but I think and I support the inquiry from Senator Plett, because I believe we got to start doing some tangible things as well. Because the truth of the matter is ethnocentrism and racism and discrimination are part and parcel of human nature. They've existed for 4,000 years. They exist even in this great country, because sometimes we become complacent. As we become complacent about our democracy, about our institutions, we become complacent about these ugly issues as well. So we need to continue to fight them. We need to continue to take action, and we can't become vigilant just because we take a step forward. Because when you become complacent, then it's very easy to fall 3 steps back. Canada, like any other place on earth, has ugliness as well that we have to accept. We have to accept that once upon a time we were banning black immigrants into this country. We were turning back boatloads of Jewish people seeking a safe haven, an ugly head tax, the internment of Japanese and Italian Canadians. These are all sad moments in Canadian history, the ugliness of residential schools. And we can go on and on. Of course, we have to learn from our history. We have to address these issues. That's what great democracies and great countries do. We have. I was very proud of our former government, Mr. Harper, addressing and apologizing for the head tax in the House of Commons. I was very proud of Mr. Harper apologizing for the residential school genocide in this country and, of course, striking the public inquiry on reconciliation. I was particularly proud as a young intern in the Mulroney government. I was working, and I'm getting very old now, so I was working for then Minister Jerry Wiener, and the Mulroney government dealt with the redress of Japanese interned Canadians. I was very proud of that. I was very proud of the fact that Mr. Mulroney apologized to Italian Canadians in 1993 for the internment during World War II. But we need to do more. Like I said, racism, unfortunately, and discrimination continues to persist. We see it on a day-to-day basis. And I believe it's the responsibility of all of us in all political parties. Nobody should have a monopoly on this particular issue. This is a collective effort. We've arrived at this particular dilemma as collectively, and I think we have a collective responsibility to get to the bottom of it and resolve this issue as soon as possible. And like I said, it's not symbolisms that are going to resolve this. It's not running to the front of a protest or taking a knee or just nice debates. We need to actually have inquiries, have investigations, find out why these things are going on in a country where we have laws to fight systemic racism, to fight institutionalized racism. We have the Charter of Rights. We have laws that fight hate crimes and so on and so forth, but yet these things persist and they keep happening. I just want to share some personal experiences in regards to the 3 ugly elements of ethnocentrism and racism and discrimination. And my mom, like I said, who came here in 1956, a young woman, gets on a bus one day in Montreal. And she's on a bus with her friend. She's off to work. She spent most of her life on a street called Chabanel in the garment industry in Montreal, working very hard. She gets on the bus, and the bus driver, as she's talking to her friend, who's another Greek immigrant at the time, the bus driver turns around and says, Hey, toi, parle français, ici au Québec.
Speak French. Here in Quebec, you should speak French. And if you can't speak French, then go back where you came from.
That was one experience she had. And at the end of the day, it stayed with her for a very long time, because in her mind, she was chez moi. This is home. This is where I belong. And she's told that story on a number of occasions, how little she felt that day. And that was an experience of ethnocentrism. I remember, well, I actually remember this experience a few years later with my dad. I was about 5, 6 years old, time to go to school. Again, my dad had come to this country in '59, understood the importance of, while in Rome, do as the Romans. You got to pick up that important language of French in Quebec. We were proud to be there. He was proud to be there. So he takes me to register me to school. That early morning, we go to school, local French school. I show up with my birth certificate. They look at it. They look at him. They said, sorry, you can't register your son here. He says, why not? He says, because you're Greek Orthodox. And of course, as Mark would know, you couldn't register back then at a Catholic school board in Montreal, which is the only place you were able to get a French education. Again, my dad walked away and we had to find an alternative. Despite that, I found a way to learn the French language and I went to an English school. We persevered, but he felt that day a little bit of discrimination. He said, well, you know, what, just because I happen to be a different Christian sect, I can't register you to French school? Of course, I've had another experience which shapes my mind on things, and that has to deal with racism, which is a little bit uglier, much more uglier than discrimination or ethnocentrism. And it's a story I haven't shared, colleagues, before. It's a bit painful. I went to school, a good friend of mine, his name was Anthony. We spent many years together at Chambéry High. One of the greatest human beings I've ever met. Didn't have a mean bone in his body. We played together, we lived together, we coexisted together. And I went to Chambéry High. Couldn't get, that was the real United Nations. Jews and Greeks and blacks and Hindus and you name it, we had it. Anthony happened to be black, I happened to be Greek Orthodox. Different experiences, different backgrounds. Same, you know, our parents came to this country with the same dreams and aspirations. We had the same dreams and aspirations. I go on to university. And one day I open up the newspaper and Anthony had been picked up by the police. It was in the fall of 1987. He had a skirmish with a taxi driver after being out one night, over $25 fare. And they take him to the police station, handcuffed. He was arrested. And Anthony had gotten into a little bit of trouble after high school, but I can tell you it wasn't much serious trouble other than kid trouble. And in this particular instance, the police arrest him, they take him to the police station, gets out of the car, 19-year-old kid, probably scared that his mother's going to give him a whipping when he finds out what's going on, bolts away from the car. Police officer comes out, yells at him to stop. He turns around, he stops. Police officer shoots him in the head. Unarmed, 19 years old, handcuffed, over an altercation of $25 with a cab driver. He bolts away, and as soon as the cop asks him to stop, he stops, he turns around, shoots him in the head. Anthony Griffin was his name. Mark, you might remember the story back in 1987. At the end of the day, I look back at that and I say to myself, what did Anthony do to deserve that? Seriously. Now, that police officer went to court, 2 trials, was acquitted twice because he claims it was a mistake. His gun went off mistakenly. So I say to myself, even back then as a young man, did you mistakenly pull the gun out of your holster? Did you mistakenly point at his head? So if he wasn't a racist, he was certainly incompetent. And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, we've seen far too much, even now, 35 years later, too much of this, too much of Indigenous people in this country being stopped by cops unarmed and ending up dead. So either if we have a serious problem amongst our police forces and they're incompetent and they're not trained well and there's some kind of a culture where it leads to systemic poor behavior, or at the end of the day, it's a lot more sinister and uglier than that. So at some point, colleagues, this has to stop. And I agree with Senator Dick. We have a police commissioner who the government brought in with tremendous fanfare, made a commitment to make substantive changes, and a couple of years later, we're back where we started from. At the end of the day, colleagues, we all have our experiences that have shaped us, and I can go on, but I know, Speaker, there's limited times, and many want to participate in the debate. All I'm going to say is this, that we in this institution have an obligation to come forward with concrete inquiries, get to the bottom of some of the institutional problems we have in this country, find out if it's a policing issue, find out if it's an issue with the systems we have in place, and resolve this issue. Because until such time that we find a way that every Canadian feels part and parcel of our Canadian dream, we will not be a successful society. As long as there are people feeling disenfranchised and not part of our society, we will not achieve the potential greatness of this great country, which I think we must continue to work and be vigilant in making it greater. Thank you, colleagues.